Welcome classic rock fans to another episode of Classic Album Review, where classic albums are excavated and explored, and today we're looking at Stadium Arcadium by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. This band are a bit of an anathema for music fans, and certainly those who follow my channel are probably into all that prog stuff. They're probably scratching their heads and ironing their capes as we speak, wondering how I could dare to profess a liking for this band. This band have always sounded like one of my favourite phrases, the bastard progeny of, in this case, Sly and the Family Stone and kind of Grand Funk Railroad, especially in terms of their attitude and energy. But what can I say, they intrigue me. I'll give them that. I think often their antics often belie the compositional qualities that they sometimes display, and particularly on this album. Those that do watch my channel probably view this music as a bit dumb, but then we live in a world where dumb is the new black, apparently. But I would refute that. I think there's a lot more going on with this band than we give them credit for. I must admit, in terms of the Red Hot Chilies, I must admit to liking all the wrong stuff. I tend to enjoy the material sort of Californication onwards, where the emphasis tends to be on melodicism and songwriting rather than the more urban influences of the early material. Of course, according to NME, their later stuff is just not edgy enough to be cool, I suspect. And I agree. Certainly there's no more socks on cocks or cocks on socks. Crikey, suddenly I'm Dr. Seuss. And what we get with Stadium Arcadium is an expansive work that has the idea of universal connection as its very driving theme. A bit like Wi-Fi, but more cosmic. But interestingly, there is an interest in the Kabbalah, which is a kind of Western esoteric brand or stream emanating from ancient Judaism, which the band seem to have all subscribed to. In terms of the mystical stuff, and I must admit I'm a bit of a novice myself, the Kabbalah is actually a set of teachings meant to explain the relationship between the unchanging, eternal God in essence, and the mortal finite universe, which is God in manifestation. The word Kabbalah is actually a Hebrew word itself, which means to receive. Anthony Kiedis, well, I think the whole band were very much into this stuff when they did this album. In fact, they have 28 tracks sprawling across 4 sides of vinyl, each subtitled Jupiter and Mars. I mean, how prog is that? One of the central motifs, of course, that occurs in this album is a group of people that desperately need to identify what unites them. And that's when all this mysticism stuff comes into it. I've thought about a double album serving as perhaps a quasi-concept record, exploring themes and ideas based on, loosely perhaps, this ancient mystical strand of Judaism. Wow, you can almost hear the ghost of topographic rattling its chains from the margins. But not exactly. Of course, what we get here is a double album, 28 tracks, I believe. Double albums are cursed, basically. It's very hard to find a double album that is consistently brilliant. Maybe Electric Ladyland or Exile on Main Street, perhaps. Blonde on Blonde is another one, I guess. But I wouldn't hold this album up with those particular excavated relics, but it's still pretty damn good as far as I'm concerned. The ideas and themes expressed on this album seem to point to a band that has matured like myself, or some might say soured perhaps. But I think it's fair to say that they were looking something beyond the coke-snorting shagfest that was the LA music scene that perhaps very much influenced the early material. But these guys are in their 50s now. It's probably all mindfulness, meditation, veganism and colonic flushes that provides the impetus for their day. And according to Joe Madden over at NME, this is what is very much wrong with their music post-Californication. He argues the sort of music this band now is the sort of stuff your sat-nav would fart out as you were driving towards Worksop. But of course, as I've said, we get a double album. There are many out there that feel a double album is a rather flabby affair, an excuse for an idea dump. But, I think those of us who are down on the idea of this band releasing a double album ought to count their lucky stars to a certain extent. There was enough material. The original idea was to record 3 single albums and release them. I think there was going to be a 6-month period between each one. They managed to consolidate all the best stuff on 2 discs, of course 28 tracks. But I must admit, and I tend to lower my voice when I say this, I do hope that one day we'll get a deluxe box set with all the tracks actually released with a few extras thrown in. 6 sides of esoteric funk to keep my toes tapping well into my dotage. This album was recorded at the mansion where all the magic took place. Bit of a joke there. For those of you not in the know, of course, the Red Hot Chili Peppers recorded their famous Blood Sugar Sex Magic there in 1991, I believe. However, interestingly, guitarist John Frusciante said that he felt the place was haunted, that there was some other force kind of plucking at his strings. In fact, what he actually said is that there were beings of higher intelligence controlling what I was doing. I didn't know how to talk about it or explain it. It was very clear to me that the music was coming from somewhere other than me. Well, he's not the first one, of course. I mean, there's a lot of bands from the 60s that speak of kind of out-of-body experiences, out-of-mind experience, perhaps. But what I found intriguing is that, according to Wikipedia, the band wanted to produce something that was quite tight, small and digestible, something very much in the vein of those early Beatles albums. So how we go from that to a sprawling opus of 28 tracks, I don't know. Perhaps they were looking for something that was as infinite as the universe, to juxtapose the finite in man. We are stardust, we are golden, as Joni Mitchell sang. But I think on this album they take that idea beyond the metaphorical. Although, in actual fact, scientists do say we are literally made up of stardust. So there's definitely some truth to all that trippy Woodstock thing. But I do really enjoy the later Chili's albums. There's more diversity to what they do, I think. It combines many aspects of what I call musical cross-pollination, and this one is no exception. The band's signature funk is definitely all over this one. We get tracks that have a distinctive heavy vibe, which surprised me, as the guitar on, by the way, was quite subdued, I think, to a certain extent, delicate in many respects. I think John Frusciante said that he wanted choruses that had very much have a heavy metal guitar sound to them. But there has been a change in the way he plays guitar over the years. I think on those early records it was more of a kind of a minimalistic gnarl, trying to emulate those punk players that he's so revered. He had a more abrasive, bludgeoning style. On this one we get a lot more delicate playing, heavily influenced by Hendrix, it has to be said. Maybe it was Rehab that was a kind of an awakening for him, a sort of an epiphany. He actually did have a kind of what I call an epiphany Spears as he shaved his head as well. Although that was probably before Rehab. Heroin really messes with you. The point overall is that the guy's playing is excellent, and it really adds some wonderful shades and textures to this album that fits nicely thematically into what they were trying to do. And even Anthony Kiedis's vocals have gone beyond that sort of Hendrix Iggy Pop growl that he used to do to a much more delicate phrasing. You know, he is all over this record, orbiting around like Timothy Leary. If you are looking for evidence of those Hendrix influences, the song Snow Hay, or Snow Hay O I think it's called, is definitely an example of that, where we get a Hendrix riff that is somewhat altered or funkified. But other influences on this record he's cited as Tony Iommi and even Wu-Tang Clan. The guitarist from the Mars Volta, Omega Rodriguez Lopez, who also guests on this album as well. But it's that change in the guitar sound which does a lot to affect the dynamics and sound of this record. There's a lot of double layering on this record. That's something that John Frusciante fought against, especially on Mother's Milk. On Mother's Milk he wanted a much cleaner and starker sound, and it was something that was done on the behest of the producer. But I don't think Frusciante was very happy with that. The layering on this record, of course, gives it an almost otherworldly feel. And the guitar works perfectly in unison with the modular synth that they use. Anthony Kiedis has gone on to say this album was influenced by all the relationships that the band were having at the time, and it does focus on that idea of needing to connect. And it's from there that this album draws its energy and its potency. There are some interesting reviews of this album. I'm going to quote Wikipedia at length for this. Rolling Stone's Brian Hayett deemed it to be the band's best album to date and noted Kiedis' growth as a singer and songwriter. The magazine later ranked it as their second best album, released in 2006, behind Modern Times by Bob Dylan. Also, Q magazine said it was one of the year's best albums, while Andrew Perry of The Observer stated it was relentless, purposeful, as Moorish as McDonald's. Mainstream America in excelsis. Josh Kahn of the LA Times wrote that they've never sounded so good as musicians. The songs do express maturity. They touch on themes like death, love, relationships, marriage proposals even, believe it or not. It's not just what many critics of this band would describe as retardedly painful funk. The songcraft literally sparkles here, I think. We are stardust after all, amid the call for a universal oneness that just emanates and oozes from all the grooves. With this band, there have definitely been a paradigm shift from all that horny slap and tickle shenanigans that very much defined their earlier stuff. Although there is a track on this album called Humpty Bump, which does perhaps belong to that retardedly painful funk category. Kiedis's lyrical writing is wonderful on this one. There is a mastery explored here. He really pushes himself. We get drawing on a broader range of influences. Of course, the whole band as well were exploring newer tones, which is important here. There are lots of elements on this record that are fairly formulaic in terms of the Chili sound. I mean, there is some, apart from that kind of experimental vibe, that conceptual identity that underpins the record, of course. It is a bit of a trek to listen to in one sitting, but what double albums are not? There's no Revolution 9 on this, so you can't just get up and go and make a cup of tea. But it's all pretty entertaining fare, I have to say. Even though disc 2 does tend to sag a little bit, but most double albums do, as I've said, apart from that Holy Trinity that I mentioned earlier. But overall, one has to applaud their ambition. There's a vibe on this album of working towards something bigger than themselves, other than what one critic described as California sun-drenched surf bollocks, or words to that effect. And it all works very well, of course. There's no doubt they have softened in terms of within the paradigms of what they do. They're not going to suddenly turn into simpering plaid-shirted balladeers, of course. This album is still a fairly testosterone-fueled fest in some places. The aforementioned Humpty Bump is old school, not particularly my cup of tea. Anthony Kiedis has said that he's not a great fan of this song either. But you get fast, goofy guitar work and that reverberating bass that just jumps about, of course. Flea's trademark playing, which very much defines the sound of this band. You get tracks like, Storm in a Teacup, Turn It On Again, Animal Bar. It explores the tonal capabilities of Frusciante's guitar playing, and generally there seems to be something for everybody on this record, from sort of funk, metal, balladeering, interesting vocal phrasing, and harmonies, a hodgepodge of chilliness. Many have argued that what this band is kind of a diluted or bastardised funk. They're probably to funk what many would argue the Police are to reggae. And although this album, there is a lot more emphasis on the songwriting and tonal qualities overall, they do certainly sprinkle that magic funk dust over a lot of it, as a doff of the baseball cap to their younger, more wired selves. I do overall like the sound of this record. I've not always been happy with the production on some of the Chili's previous albums, I must admit. I think Rick Rubin's got it right here, and I find him as a producer rather hit and miss. In fact, I think one critic has said of this album, in Rick Rubin's sterile environment, the band sounds like they're in jam band training camp, filling all the empty spaces with blippity-blap reminders of Flea's virtuosity and John Frusciante's desire to use every effects pedal ever invented. Quite harsh, actually, because I overall like the sound on this one. He does make an interesting point, of course, that the Chili's have always been a rhythmic act. Flea has spent years crafting that frantic popping and slapping as often counter-melodic minimalism that just twangs away within the paradigms of funk and rock. Yet he does offer a virtuosity and a bass style that is just intriguing to watch. And if you ever see the Chili's live, he certainly steals the show. And his playing melds seamlessly with Chad Smith's style of swing drumming. As Rolling Stone says, Flea's quacking double-time lines on 21st Century are a reminder that the Chili Peppers were recording Gang of Four influenced danced rock back when Franz Ferdinand was just a dead Austrian. We do get some what I call lapses in quality. We get some rather absurd and dumb lyrics, of course, Python-esque in some respects. I don't know if they're meant to be or not. For example, some unapologetic gobbledygook like tickety, tickety, tacketa, tic-tac-toe, I know everybody's an Eskimo. What the fudge that's all about, I don't know. And the band's older funk rapping style is often juxtaposed to their more melodic musings and tunage. But it's conceptually, as I've said, that I find this record quite interesting. I think one motif, as I've said, was the title track evokes the image of a group of people listening to music, creating a light that reflects up into the universe, becoming a mirror to the moon. Interesting, Storm Thorgerson was approached in terms of the album art, but they rejected what he had to offer and instead went for the kind of almost comic book superhero look that they eventually felt linked into the idea of reaching for the stars. So I'm just going to whip through some of the songs, not all 28 of them though. Make You Feel Better feels like homage to 60s pop with its very Crosby McGuinn style vocal harmonies and that Ringo thump. Charlie, it's not about cocaine by the way. It sounds like a greyer downbeat version of Give It Away until it bursts into all those very kaleidoscopic shards and tones that Frusciante brings to this song. Apparently this song is very much about the thought process, the imaginative process, anything that is at the very centre of your life. Tell Me Baby is just funk-fueled riffing. If is an interesting one. Interestingly, because they said it was influenced by folk rock. Apparently they were listening to a lot of Fairport and stuff like that when they, Fairport and Neil Young in fact, when they produced this one. Has some lovely background, eerie Art Garfunkel style vocals to it though. Danny California is obviously the single off this album. It's interesting as well because the girl in the song is kind of a motif for the Chili's. She features in the song By the Way, and she's the actual girl that's mentioned in Californication, the teenage bride with the baby inside. Snow Hey-O is the one with that wonderful Frusciante riff. It's about trying to forget one's past, that image of snow, something that's clean, as one's footprints are eventually covered up. Wet Sand is a standout track on this album. It's about the darkness and light present in a love affair or that type of relationship. NME is quite unjustly described as a bit of slick California contempo pop hell. I don't quite agree with that. And Desecration Smile is another one. It's my favourite song on this album. I believe it was also a single. Anthony Kiedis has said this song is about the dark side of love, about a relationship that's gone wrong, and it's a song that effectively haunts the hell out of him. Tell Me Baby is a song that arose from a jam. It's about the whole raft of human beings that flood into California, Hollywood, trying to make it big. They very much underpin the place with their energy and optimism, but also their tragedy. Ready Made is one of those Ramones-influenced songs, I think. She Looks to Me, it has a spirit and emotion which distinguishes it from many of the other songs on this album. 21st Century is a song about the madness of this century, really, of course. Make You Feel Better, all about the gifts you get in life, which you perhaps don't realise are gifts. She's Only 18, the working title for this was Funkadelish for me, apparently. I read some of the Billy Preston plays on this. I mean, crikey, that guy must be cracking on these days. But it's about the madness and method of show business and essentially that psychological need to be validated by this world. You know, a bit like us YouTubers. You know, and there's loads of other numbers. We Believe is another one that interests me, as its working title was Failure Funk. It has an African vibe to it, but essentially it's a song about the importance of having faith and the power that comes from that. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up there. I would like to say, if you do appreciate the effort and writing that goes into these reviews and you found them interesting, please check out some of the links below for ways you can support my channel. You can donate, become a Patreon perhaps, or even just go check out the Facebook page where I post stuff on there on a daily basis. Other than that, I will say do please click like, subscribe and check that bell to get notified of any future uploads. So, I hope you're all well, stay safe, more importantly, please do keep listening.